Here's back to a week in politics.
Good evening to a week in politics in which a few people were taught a lesson. Tony Blair learned not to mess with air traffic controllers. John Major learned that one good Pole is soon forgotten, and we've sent an Italian reporter to teach the people of Tatton how sleaze should really be done.
And where is Britain's place in Europe? At the heart, at the head, at arm's length, or amputated? Voters from the fishing town of Lowestoft will be filleting and grilling the politicians.
Today, all of the parties have been trying to campaign on the issues they think the voters like about them. The Tories decided to talk about defence. So Michael Portillo turned up to tell us all that we're not safe with Labour, but his press conference was hijacked by Sunday Times journalist Michael Prescott, who read out a new campaign leaflet from John Redwood.
From inside government, I argued for lower interest rates, an earlier exit from the ERM, a free vote on the Maastricht Treaty. I argued against VAT on fuel, against the changes to mortgage interest relief, and so on. Mr. Heseltine, Mr. Portillo, you were in government alongside John Redwood. I just wonder, why didn't you listen to him, or were you secretly on the same side of him while these arguments were raging?
I was rather, still am indeed, but was even more a junior member of the Cabinet then, and didn't get involved in those discussions.
I'm joined in the studio by Charles Kennedy, Robin Cook and Michael Portillo. Michael, did it slip your mind that you were Chief Secretary to the Treasury at the time that these matters were being discussed?
No, certainly not. I was involved in discussions about some of these subjects, and I was a participant in all the decisions of the government and wholeheartedly agree with all the decisions of the government. But I was being asked specifically about some meetings that I think John Redwood must have been at.
No, he said he argued against them, and you were asked your position, and you shrugged it off by saying you were a junior member of the Cabinet. You actually led for the government on the finance bill in committee in 1993. You knew all about it.
I did not. Of course, I knew about our decisions, but I was being asked about what John Redwood had said in some meetings that he was at. Now, the point is that I was part of those decisions, and John Redwood was in the government all that time, and he was part of those decisions too. And we are all bound by collective responsibility, and we all agreed with the decisions that were taken.
Absolutely. So let's be clear about this then. When John Redwood argued against raising VAT and fuel, you did not speak against that. You agreed with it.
I'm not prepared to say what any individual said during the course of those discussions. Our decisions were collective. We're all bound by those decisions. I was bound by them. I was a participant in them, a willing participant. I'm proud of the decisions that we took. And John Redwood, I'm sure, was proud of them too, because he was also part of it.
Right, let's just change the subject now and go to Robin Cook. Labour has made it clear that you don't want the strike of Essex firemen to go ahead. Would you consider in government introducing legal curbs in essential services, strikes in essential services?
David Blunkett made a speech last autumn in which he set out our position in relation to those who work within all the public services. And that is, we will agree with them a voluntary agreement to arbitration, but that arbitration will in turn be binding. Now, what should happen in Essex is precisely that. Both sides should go to arbitration. That offer has been made by the Labour Local Authority, a Labour Local Authority that's given assurance that their proposals for fire brigade will mean no redundancies, it'll mean no loss of services, and it'll mean no loss of the wage rise that the firemen are due to get. Therefore, if they do feel they have a legitimate grievance, there's no reason why they should not accept that offer of arbitration.
Now, if they don't accept voluntary arbitration, and people, including the firemen, have been known to do this, would you consider introducing, as Peter Mandelson suggests in his book, that legal restriction should be placed upon them?
Well, first of all, Vincent, actually, it is a Conservative government this is happening under.
Sure.
And we haven't yet heard what the Conservative government proposed to do.
But the Labour Authority,
well, the Labour Authority has offered arbitrations. And as a matter of fact, if I may say so, Vincent, I do understand that this afternoon there has been an agreement that the two sides will come together on Monday. It may well be we'll see this issue resolved.
But the principle, are you clear about the principle, as defined by David Plunkett and others, that in extremis, if in the event of voluntary arbitration not working or being accepted, you would consider legal curbs?
Well, now, David Blunkett didn't outline any such thing, Vincent. I mean, let's remember that there is an elementary civil liberty in a free society. I mean, as yet, we do live in a free society, and that elementary civil liberty, it must be the right in extremis to withdraw your labour.
We and the right to strike, that will stay under Labour.
Well, what you're otherwise asking for is forced labour, Vincent, and actually, I am in favour of an open and free society, but if you want to have freedom, you must exercise that freedom responsibly. We don't think a strike in these circumstances would be responsible.
Thank you. Charles Kennedy, you've been sort of left out of things this week. I mean, you gambled at offering to be honest and open about putting up taxes, cutting out negative campaigning. would help you with the voters. So far, it hasn't really helped you with the voters. You're stuck in the doldrums and you don't seem to be going anywhere. Perhaps you should have rethought it.
No, we're not going to rethink. We're going to stick to our guns. The worst thing you should do...
Virtue will have its reward, as Lord Holmes said the other day.
We shall hope so, and we shall see on May the 1st, or the early hours of May the 2nd.
Or maybe in the next life.
We're not going to change our approach in the election. And, you know, there's been quite a lot of opinion polls, a plethora. But the biggest one has been the 11,000 real votes that were cast on Thursday night in 8 local by-elections across England. We won 4 of them. We gained 3 seats that we didn't previously hold. Now that's
well, people
a valuable
pluck statistics at this point in a campaign out of the air, and you pays your money and you takes your poll and you takes your chance.
Well, Vincent, your question was predicated, I think, on an avid reading, and you are an avid reader, of all the opinion polls that are produced. And I'm just saying that one of 11,000, which are real votes, I think carries a bit more weight when people are actually making a choice than all the others put together.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much indeed. Please stay here and face afterwards the voters of Lowestoft.
Now, no day on the hustings is complete without a politician being rushed to hospital. It's their favourite media stunt, appearing with the sick. I'm thinking of having a card prepared saying, in the event that I fall ill, I do not wish to donate myself to a photo opportunity. Health issues have been causing lively debate on Downing Street, Chippenham, and the question of tactical voting has caused an unhealthy rift in one family. Here's the next episode of our real-life political soap.
Well, in August I found a lump in my breast, and I went to my doctor, and eventually, through a referral, I managed to get an ultrasound done. From that, from Chippenham down to Bath, my notes disappeared. And then I had to go down to Bath, which is when I found out my notes had disappeared, then back to Chippenham, then back to Bath. I found my lump in my breast in August. It wasn't finally removed till February.
So you've been down to Bath fairly recently?
Yeah. Thankfully, it was benign, but the stress of knowing you had this in your body, no woman should have to wait that long. The nursing care is incredibly good, but they just can't cope under the pressure. So it will influence my vote.
My name's Adrian McCabe. I'm a financial advisor, and I've voted Labour in the past and intend to vote Labour now. When my wife Anne and I first met, we were compatible politically and still are to a very great extent.
My name is Anne Ellery and I'm a solicitor. I really expected Labour to get in last time, and I can remember feeling completely depressed when I woke up the next morning and there was yet another Conservative government in power. This time I don't think I will waste my vote. I think this time I will vote Lib Dem. They have a better chance than anyone of getting the Tories out in this area. Adrian has felt that you should always vote on what you believe in, and it's a moral issue. On the one hand, he wants to vote Labour, and it would go against the grain to vote for anybody else because he doesn't believe in the Liberal Democrats' policies. But at the same time, he also wants a change of government, and I think he is coming round to seeing the value of tactical voting in this area.
I'm not reconsidering how I should put my vote. I'm still firmly going to put my ex in the Labour Party box. It would seem not immoral, but it would seem a bit misplaced to vote for a party that you didn't particularly have any belief in.
Hello, all right. Fine, thanks. How are you?
Just going over the field?
Yeah, I'm just taking her for a walk.
I'm just going to go for a wander.
So how did you find the waiting list?
I found the waiting list, well, in my case, extremely long.
Why?
Well, because there's not enough people on the ground as such, because of the funding is so short. They can't afford the nurses.
But surely an operation as serious as yours, they would have put you forward pretty fast, do you know?
They can't always. The Conservatives haven't really done anything for the past 18 years for the National Health Service.
I still can't see how Labour can make it work.
By cutting down on the white-collared workers and putting the money that they save from them
to cut down the weight
into the nurses. That is the most important basis that people like me needed.
I haven't quite made up my mind yet between the Liberal and the Conservative and the Labour Party yet, because health and education is obviously a point that I've got to think about seriously and take into consideration because of my 2 young children.
Yeah. Health-wise, as you get older, you get more problems and you need a better cover.
So which party do you think is going to deliver this for us?
How would you feel if you woke up then and you know, if there was a hung parliament because there was an enormous swing towards Lib Dems, or even, dare I say, the Lib Dems have gained so much control?
I think I'd be really upset if a lot of people moved away from Labour in marginal or strong seats, strong Labour seats, to vote Lib Dem. How do you feel about Tony Blair's stance on a Scottish Parliament now? Would that affect your voting pattern?
No, it wouldn't change my attitude to voting for Labour. He did make a gaffe, quite a serious gaffe in the eyes of the Scottish vote, by referring to, you know, Scotland as a parish council of the UK. It was a very, very serious gaffe, and he will pay the price for it. But it wouldn't affect my vote.
Can Adrian bear Tony Blair's inconstancy in Scotland and Anne's tactical desertion at home? Will Anne convince Adrian that tactically they could still be the perfect couple? And will Brenda's hopes for the health service convince Phyllis to make a match with Labour? Find out in the next episode of Downing Street. Now, I don't want to give anyone any ideas, but the Italians have some experience of political corruption and how to deal with it. They've thrown rather a lot of their politicians into jail. An Italian perspective on British sleaze after this short break.
Welcome back. On Monday, the Liberal Democrat Association in Tatton will meet to decide whether their candidate will step aside to give Martin Bell a clear run against Neil Hamilton. The issue of sleaze still commands the headlines, not only here, but also in the foreign reporting of the election. Now, every week during the campaign, we've been asking a foreign journalist to give us a photo diary of the campaign as they see it. This week, Alfio Bernabei of the newspaper L'Unita gives us an Italian perspective on sleaze.
Until very recently, corruption has been endemic in Italy. The politicians have colluded with the mafia. Neil Hamilton's shenanigans are of a very different nature and scale. I went to Tatton to see for myself what British sleaze was all about. All too often, I feel the English trust of their politicians' honesty has bordered on naivety, and I wondered whether I would see any signs of new realism in Tatton. But Mr. Hamilton's corner of Tatton has an unreal atmosphere. All around, there were signs of celebration and pride that the Tories had defiantly reselected him as their candidate. Is this what Tory loyalty means? Surely Mr. Hamilton could have considered putting the National Party's interest above his own. I went to ask him, making my way to a door guarded by regal lions and unicorns. He wouldn't come to the door, but we were ambushed by Mrs. Hamilton.
We are fighting a campaign for truth, honesty and justice. And the corruption in this country is not in politics, it's not in Parliament, it's in the media.
Any chance of a cup of tea? This woman is formidable. The Hamiltons' tenacity in holding on to their position is truly English. It must have something to do with the weather or cricket. Martin Bell does not appear English. Signor Clean Hands seems to have come down from a mountain. With his campaign HQ in a subterranean bar and run by his 24-year-old daughter, Melissa, are they the right people to be taking up such a burden?
My father thinks that certain rules exist and that to enforce those rules properly, enforcement needs to be independent and come from without Parliament, from the outside.
I don't think it should have been left to Martin Bell to try and raise moral standards. He strikes me as genuine, but isolated, lonely, vulnerable. I can't help feeling that it would be better for everyone if Britain had investigative magistrates to crack down on sleaze, as we now do in Italy. Only then will Britain be able to trust its politicians again, just like we do.
News of two important birthdays this week. Dick Turpin, born in 1739, who believed in and practiced highway robbery, and the great showman Phineas Barnum, born in 1891, whose motto was, "There's a sucker born every minute." Their reincarnations can be found in the Treasury teams and spin doctors of this election campaign. Andrew will now point them out to you.
One American candidate for the presidency had a disarmingly honest way of avoiding awkward questions. "That's a very good question," he would say. "Now let me try to evade it." Technique 1 in question evasion is demonstrated here by John Major.
I'm certainly prepared to look at the question that you raise.
Note he says nothing about actually answering it. If that fails, it's on to evasion technique 2.
I've answered that question repeatedly, and I don't really have anything to add to it.
And while we all try to remember when he actually answered it, he's off to the next question. A clever variant of this ruse is to imply that the questioner really hasn't been following things.
And I invite you to look again at what I said, for example, at the Albert Hall a week or so ago.
While everyone is digging out their dog-eared copies of a long-forgotten speech, he's avoided the question. Be wary of a politician who promises a clear answer.
First of all, let me just make one thing clear.
The more a policy is in a muddle, the more the politician must protest that it's always been clear.
I've made it absolutely clear.
The absolutely is the giveaway that it's never been less clear. If things get rough, warn the questioner, he won't get another go.
Please try and contain yourself, Vincent. Otherwise we may not call you again if you're going to be bad.
Shooting the messenger is one of the oldest tricks in the trade, employed here by one of politics' oldest dogs. Why aren't the Tories paying more attention to inner-city deprivation?
I make speech after speech after speech setting out these matters, and I can tell you that before I write a word of it, I know they will get no coverage.
You see, it's all our fault. For opposition politicians, the favoured way to avoid an awkward choice is to say they're in no position to make it.
This is a matter that will be decided in government.
Don't ask me, I'm only hoping to be Chancellor. If things get really sticky, play for time. This is Liberal Democrat campaign manager Richard Home.
I'm going to have to come back to you later with a mention of industrial relations, which I'm confident are in here. You're obviously confident they're not, but I'll come back to you later on.
So we waited, and then this happened.
OK, well, thank you all very much. See you tomorrow.
And by tomorrow, he hopes that we've all forgotten the question he never did get round to answering. If a politician is truly desperate, he can always beg for mercy and plead ignorance.
You'll forgive me. I don't comment on things I have not yet been brought fully up to date with.
Well, he did say he'd be honest, and much good may it do him. On Wednesday, nominations for candidates will close, and you might have thought that the parties would have got their prospective MPs, well, in their safe seats at least, in position well before now. Not so for Labour. Only today were the last vacant seats filled as an NEC panel met to confirm candidates for 3 remaining seats. The reason for the last-minute rush is that since the election was announced, no fewer than 7 sitting Labour MPs have suddenly remembered that they had all along wanted to retire. John Evans, Doug Hoyle, Norman Hogg, Sir Geoffrey Lofthouse, Willie McKelvey, Stuart Randall and Dr John Gilbert have all at once decided that after 18 years in opposition, the sun should set on their political careers, now that Labour has a real chance of forming a government. Now, you couldn't accuse all of these 7 of being old Labour, but some of their replacements are sure to boost the party's quota of thrusting Blairites. Tripping confidently into the new Labour dawn, the 28-year-old journalist Yvette Cooper has grabbed the Pontefract and Castleford seat, while in Scotland, Rosemary McKenna, a member of the Mac-Blairite group known as the Network, is poised to take Cumbernauld. And only today, Alan Johnson of the Union of Communication Workers, one of the most Blairite of all the brothers, was flown in to fight the Hull West seat. Now, of course, friends of Peter Mandelson deny claims that there was any pressure on the sitting MPs to give up their warm seats for the next generation, or any offers of honours to ease the pain. But there is an extra bonus for Mr Blair in getting rid of these venerable statespersons. Older members are far more likely to retire, or indeed to die, in mid-session. By parachuting in these relative youngsters, Mr Blair may have avoided 1 or 2 potentially difficult by-elections over the next 5 years. Probing questions on Europe with the people of Lowestoft, after this short break.
Welcome back. Europe has been the issue waiting to explode, and this weekend it's done just that to the Tory campaign. As many as 200 Tory candidates are expected to pen personal manifestos defying in spirit, if not in letter, Mr Major's wait-and-see policy towards a single currency. Mind you, the Tories are not the only ones with Euro troubles. We've been to Lowestoft in Suffolk to hear how the debate on Europe is playing in one of our major fishing ports. It's the largest town in the marginal Tory seat of Waveney, which Labour must win if they're to get an overall majority. KYE is an engineering company which looks towards Europe for future trade. Nearby is JT Cole, the oldest fish wholesalers in the town, where Europhobia is fuelled by the decline of the fish industry.
At 7 in the morning, the daily fish auction gets underway. But these men are part of a dying industry. Catches in Lowestoft are now down to only a quarter of what they were 15 years ago. The European Union, especially its common fisheries policy and quota restrictions, are seen as the reason. Brussels is a dirty word around here.
Tomatoes have got to be square, cucumbers have got to be oblong, pigs have got to be pink, you can't put vinegar on chips.
Is that what you really think the European Union says?
Well, that's what it does. It's not what it says, it's what it's doing in it.
Now we're in Europe, we've got to stay in, but have a major say. Our voice has got to be heard, not Brussels. We've got to be able to put the British opinion across.
Whichever government would take us out of Europe, for my money, they would get my vote.
JT Cole is still one of the biggest fish wholesalers on the dock, but they've shed almost a third of their workers in the last 10 years. People here don't want closer integration.
We're actually starting to get into a federal Europe, whereas before, really and truly, Britain only entered Europe for the free trade.
As the fish markets decline, newer industries are developing. KYE is an engineering company supplying components for the oil and gas industry. Almost half of their customers are overseas, and they're keen to expand trade with Europe. British hostility to Europe is not helpful.
The greater reluctance and hesitancy that the politicians show to the more full integration of UK PLC and its firms in Europe can only be damaging.
We need to work together with these people. We need to shake hands with them, but we don't need to be joined at the hip.
It's not exactly a steady 9 to 5 at KYE. The company trades on its ability to deal with emergency jobs overnight if necessary. At peak times, the workforce swells to around 400, with short-term contracts and frequent 100-hour weeks. They call it a flexible workforce, but if the social chapter came into force here, its working time directives and job protection laws could threaten that.
We need people to work long hours for a short amount of time, and the chapter would actually cause me a lot of problems.
I don't believe the company would be adversely affected if all companies had the same constraints put on them.
With many of the pipes and spare parts going for export, there's dismay that no party is prepared to commit itself to a single currency. And there's a worry that the Tories in particular, still thought of here as the party of business, are refusing to respond to this company's primary concern.
I believe most businesses want and need the single currency, and the Tories are speaking out against it, and I can't understand. Tell me what you think of a single currency.
Total waste of time again, isn't it? We're still going further down the bloody tubes, aren't we? Because they'll dictate more to what we can do.
Well, some of the people of Lowestoft are with me in the studio here to grill our politicians. Brian, we saw you in the film saying you were concerned about the Conservatives' attitude towards the single currency. Do you think their hostility towards it is going to damage business like yours?
Yes, I do indeed, yes. The Tories are supposed to be the party of business, and I believe business wants a single currency. I would ask Mr Portillo why he isn't responding to what business wants and committing to a single currency.
Michael Portillo.
Brian, I don't accept what you say, I'm afraid. I don't accept that there is a united voice of business that says we should be in the single currency. I think there are many different opinions with some businessmen thinking that it would be good and some bad, and many not having made up their mind. We believe that we are in a good position because John Major, uniquely for Britain, won the right for us to make up our mind when a proper proposal was in front of us, which is unlikely to be before 1999 and might be sometime beyond that, whereas other countries signed up to this in 1991 when they couldn't possibly know what the conditions were. And even in the last few months, Brian, I think we've seen that the likelihood of this, the approach to this, whether it's going to be firm or whether it's going to be soft, the perspectives on all of those things have been changing, which I think illustrates the wisdom of keeping the option open.
Michael Portillo, why don't you be honest with Brian and say, look, we know that about 200 of your candidates are going to say in no circumstances would they ever vote to go into a single currency, or as good as. Why not be honest with him and say a Conservative government will never take us into a single currency?
Well, because we have
It's true, isn't it?
Because we have a government position, and the government position is that we will consider this when we get to it. And it's true that some candidates are expressing what their approach to that question is. But this is not going to arise until 1999 at the earliest.
All right, Brian, are you happy with that? No, let's see if he's happy
sure,
with that answer. Are you happy with that?
Well, that really answers the feeling that I believe you hold.
You shouldn't vote Conservative if you want a single currency. Is that the conclusion that brings you to?
That seems to be where it's taking us, yes.
But, Brian, I'm interested as to why you've reached the view that all business has a united view.
All right, Michael, I'm interested in bringing in somebody else, and that's Michael Cole. Michael Cole, you have a slightly different view about a single currency.
Yes, I'm very worried about the single currency, and I'd like to see it properly ruled out.
You want a party that completely rules it out. Charles Kennedy, your party's the most enthusiastic for a single currency. Convince him otherwise.
Well, we're instinctively for, and I think whatever the careful positioning of both Labour and Conservative on this, you've got a right to know what the instincts of parties are on the issue. We all accept that it may not happen, or if it does happen and we don't meet the criteria, we shouldn't go in. And even if we do meet the criteria and it does happen, there still has to be a referendum.
Right, let me just
but
go back
instinctively, on principle, a good idea, because if you did have a single currency and it went ahead and we were outside it, then from a business point of view, it would be like Manhattan trying to run a separate dollar from the rest of the United States.
Michael, has that convinced you, that argument?
No, not at all.
Why not?
I'm convinced that we shouldn't have one.
Why are you
I think we'll lose our sovereignty. We've got to deposit our gold reserves in Europe.
No, you don't.
And we will lose our control of our own interest and our own mortgage rates.
All right, let me bring Alan Mills in. Alan, you're the managing director of KYE. What's your take on the single currency?
Well, I believe that a single currency is good for business, and KYE want that. I voted Tory in the past, and with Michael Portillo and the government's current position, lukewarm position, I might add, on single currency, my vote, frankly, is up for grabs.
Right, Robin Cook, there's a vote up for grabs. Were it not for the fact that you followed the Tories down this Eurosceptical line?
Not at all, Andrew. I think actually in this discussion I find myself the centre party. Our view is that the single currency should not be ruled out on the basis of prejudice, as so many Conservatives do, nor should we sign up to an act of faith, which is what the Liberal Democrats offer. We believe that the decision to join or not to join must be based on a hard-headed assessment of the economic reality. The points made here are perfectly fair, legitimate points. There are other ones.
Let me bring in Alan. I mean, nobody would say, of course, that you'd make the assessment in a soft-headed way. So, I mean, everybody,
I'm glad to have your confirmation.
Well, no, I mean, you would say that, wouldn't you?
Good.
Alan Mills, I mean, would you be more convinced by Robin Cook if he said, yes, we're going to sign up, rather than this sit-on-the-fence, wait-and-see attitude?
I really need somebody to be far more positive and constructive and direct on this one. It's such an important issue, I feel, that I'm really looking for some firmer, more constructive guidance, if you like, from the parties on their views towards a single currency, rather than the fudging of the issues.
What about Charles Kennedy's party? I mean, they're more enthusiastic. Would they attract you?
I haven't really heard what Charles Kennedy's had to say about it.
Right, you don't think that's quite enough? No?
Not yet.
No, OK. Gwen Buckingham, let's hear your view. Do you think a referendum, I mean, at least they're offering you a referendum on the single currency, is that enough?
No. I think we've been sold down the river over Europe, and I wouldn't only like to see a referendum on the single currency. I want to know whether we're in or out.
You'd like a referendum on in or out?
Yes.
And who do you think sold us down the river?
Edward Heath.
Edward Heath sold us. Michael Portillo, Edward Heath, your former leader, he sold us down the river. You defend Ed Heath for us?
I don't think that is what happened. I think people are concerned about the way the European Union may develop, and they're very concerned that it might become a federal superstate. And we are absolutely determined to guard against that. Within a few weeks of the general election, there is going to be another very important meeting like Maastricht, this time at Amsterdam. And we've made it clear that we're not going to give up our veto on any subjects. We're not going to transfer powers from our Parliament to a European Parliament. We're not going to stand for the creation of a common defence policy, and we certainly don't want to enter the social chapter, because I think the experience that you're reflecting is that this thing has grown in many ways, and many people feel that they don't now want to be drawn further towards a federal
I must
Europe.
wind you up for the moment there, Michael.
We're going to resist that.
I must wind you up, noting in passing that you reluctantly couldn't find it in you to defend Ted Heath and go to Charles Kennedy. Charles Kennedy, a lot has happened in Europe since that last referendum.
Sure.
Why not offer people a referendum on where Europe's got to now, or the outcome of the Amsterdam summit?
Yes, we should. We should. And during the passage of the Maastricht Treaty, when we voted with a highly unpopular Conservative government, Labour voting in a rather opportunistic way to create as much difficulty as possible, we voted to get that
And
treaty
you'd give us an in-out or out
too.
referendum?
We voted for a referendum on Maastricht. Never mind what's coming next. We thought there should have been a referendum on that. We're also the only ones that are saying we may well have a referendum on a currency if we get to that stage. But on the outcome of this forthcoming intergovernmental conference that Michael was referring to, if that's got constitutional implications for this country, that should have a referendum as well.
Robin Cook, would you give us the in or out referendum that this lady wants?
The Labour Party happens to be the only party on this platform that actually did give the people of Britain a referendum after
give
Ted
them
Heath
another
failed
one.
to do
It's 20
so. We
years
had one.
since that referendum.
Yes, and we've been in the European Union for 20 years since then, and to come out now would be disastrous. It's where most of our exports go, it's where a large number of jobs depend, it's why so much investment
But
comes
why not
here.
have a referendum?
It gives us clout in the world, because we believe withdrawal would be disastrous. That is actually what the referendum party is asking for, and if you believe that that withdrawal would be pointless and bad for Britain, there's no point in saying as a government we'd actually like the people to vote on this issue.
All right, let me bring in...
We firmly believe it was right to stay in and make the best deal for Britain inside.
Let me bring in Steve Bortley. Steve, you're a fish filleter, and your point is?
Well, I'm not very keen on the European community at all. But we've got to be in there negotiating for us. And at the moment, we're seen as obstructive. But we've got to be in there negotiating.
Michael Portillo, that's his point. I mean, if you're a member of a club, you've got to be in that club rather than in, out, opted out.
Yes, but I've never joined a club where I felt that I was going to be forced to do things against my will on a constant basis. And I don't believe now we should see an extension of qualified majority voting so that in areas like industrial policy and regional policy, environmental policy and social policy, we can be outvoted by other European community countries. I think if there are changes we want to make in any of those areas, we should be prepared to see those changes done in the British Parliament.
So you want to continue being obstructive?
No, I want to have national sovereignty. I want to be able to say there are certain things that matter to us. We're not going to agree to treaty changes that oblige us in those areas that I've just mentioned, oblige us to be overruled by a majority of other member states, because I think there are important national British interests in those areas which should be safeguarded.
All right,
and
I want to bring in another of our voters. Nigel Allerton, did that convince you? Did any of it convince you?
We need to make up our minds if we're in or out. I want the politicians to show some leadership on the Europe issue. That's what they're there for, isn't it?
Right, Robin Cook, that's what you're paid for. You're not paid to say, wait and see, we'll have a referendum. You're paid to show some leadership.
But on the Europe question, I'm absolutely in agreement with it. We are in Europe. We have to make the best of it. I thought actually it was expressed very well by one of those who interviewed on the film, who said we've got to shake hands with these people. We don't need to be joined at the hip. That's exactly the position that we should be adopting within Europe. And by constantly standing on the sidelines and heaving bricks at those who are playing in the team, as this government has done, we've ended up with the worst possible deal for Britain. They littered the whole of last year with the veto to try and get the beef ban lifted. They failed. There's still not a sausage being sold in Europe.
But that's no reason for your policy of giving up the veto.
A more constructive approach might actually be helpful. Look, I find it rich, Michael. You should
why
pretend
should
you
you want
defend
to
the
give up
veto.
the veto?
It was the Conservative Party that agreed to the biggest extension of majority voting in the history of Europe in the single market.
I want to pick up on that point.
And we did so
with
for...
Michael, I want to pick up on that point with Donald Cole.
Cole.
Donald Cole, we've been hearing from Michael Portillo how strong the Tories have been in Europe. Were you convinced?
Well, I think John Major has shown weakness in Europe, especially over fishing issues. And I think we need someone a lot stronger that's going to put on a better case for the British fishing industry, British fishermen, and if necessary, tell the EC where it gets off.
So John Major's useless. I mean, there are other candidates available, some say. I mean, Mr. Portillo himself is seen as on the more Eurosceptical wing. Do you think they'd have done better if he was leader?
Maybe he's the man for the job. I think someone's got to be very, very strong.
Right, you might have his vote if you were leader of the Conservative Party.
John Major is being very strong on fishing, and he is saying that when he goes to this conference in Amsterdam in June, he is going to make fishing the issue of quota hopping an essential part of our negotiating brief. And our partners must now expect that we will go to that conference prepared to veto unless we get a change on quota hopping. And by contrast, I'm afraid Robin Cook has said that he finds that fishing is not an important issue for him.
If he would, Michael,
I've got here the Labour Party policy on fishing, which I've put in this. This is their manifesto. That is the Labour Party policy on fishing. As you see, it is one sentence long, and that was all they thought.
All right, enough of your little bit of paper. Charles Kennedy isn't one of the problems. The politicians aren't being terribly honest with these people, because Europe's quite good for KYE, but it hasn't been a very good deal for the fishing industry. And maybe you have to say, if you're going to be a member of this club, some people won't do so well so that others can prosper.
No, I don't accept that analysis. A better approach for this country in Europe will benefit the energy sector as much as it can benefit
them.
If you just let me finish, Andrew, as much as it will benefit the fishing sector. The common fisheries policy is a disaster. It has got to be scrapped and it has got to be completely recast. We will not achieve that, and we will not achieve the liberalisation that we need in the energy sector either by this kind of megaphone diplomacy that the Tories have gone in for. We should have had, and we could have made progress towards, when we held the presidency, regional fisheries management within Europe. We didn't do it then. And that was a failure of leadership on the part of the Tories. And don't be hoodwinked by all this talk that they're going to turn the IGC into an eyeball-to-eyeball over quota hopping. They're not.
Right, I'd like now to move on to the social chapter, which is another crucial issue in the decision we have to make about Europe. And I want to go first to Karen Thompson, who's the personnel officer at KYE. Karen, do you have worries about the social chapter?
I have. The main thing that KYE needs a very flexible workforce, and with the social chapter, then that's going to just make my job impossible.
Impossible in what sort of way?
In as much as I need a lot of people for long hours for short-term work, and we have a lot of short-term contracts where you have to have a lot of people doing long hours.
Right, Robin Cook, a Labour government would sign up to the social chapter. Yes. You're going to make her job impossible.
Well, first of all, the social chapter doesn't cover any of the points that you are worried about, but there is the issue of the 48-hour directive. What the 48-hour directive does is say that nobody should be forced to work more than 48 hours if they don't want to. And that actually seems to me a very important freedom and important right. It's not going to stop people working over 48 hours if their employer can come to an agreement with them in which they both agree
well,
that they want to go.
let's just see about this. I mean, Michael Cole, we've heard that Brussels now wants to impose the maximum working week on your industry. What would that do to your industry?
Well, you can imagine with us, our workforce is very much on a demand basis. Sometimes there's heavy fishing, sometimes there's not. So that would completely restrict us with our workforce.
Now, Charles Kennedy, I wanted to put that to Charles Kennedy. I want to put that to Charles Kennedy
It's taken over a 6-month period. You could allow within that for the fluctuating flows of work.
Now let me put that to Charles Kennedy. I mean, he's very worried that his industry is basically, it can't work within that sort of regulation.
Well, you see, I think that the difficulty about the social chapter debate is it's been turned into the great bogey by the Conservative Party, something they want to tilt against and frighten the life out of people over. And the truth of the matter is, if you actually look at the social chapter, it is largely an aspirational document. The kind of aspirations stated are what are already being pursued by many of the best businesses operating in more than one European Union country, this one included.
All right, now let me bring in Clive Craft. Do you see, does it frighten the life out of you, the social chapter, or do you see advantages to it?
I see a lot of advantages. I see ultimately more job security, I see better social provision, and I see this for the majority of the population as opposed to the minority. This doesn't seem to be hampered in any way within Europe.
Well, let me put that across to Michael Portillo. Why shouldn't our workers have the same sort of protection and rights as the rest of Europe have?
Well, I think whatever we want to do on social policy, we should legislate for ourselves in Westminster. Why should we hand over this decision-making to Brussels? Why should we allow ourselves to be outvoted? If Robin Cook thinks things should be done differently, he ought to have the honesty to take it through Parliament. But what he's doing is signing a blank cheque, you see, because once you have said you're part of the social chapter, that means they can bring in legislation on any subject which they reckon could be right. No, on any subject.
There we have to end this discussion. Michael Portillo, Robin Cook, Charles Kennedy, thank you, and thank you most of all to the people from Lowestoft who've been putting the questions to our politicians. Thank you.
I'm afraid that's all we have time for on This Week in Politics. Join us and the voters of Portsmouth for a debate on education next Saturday. Until then, from Andrew and me and all of us here, a very good evening.